So I was out in the lobby and I was meeting everybody, and I met people from Kansas, and I met a couple who drove down from Michigan.
Wow.
I met another couple who came from Toronto. 17-hour drive. 17-hour drive, yeah.
Did you leave Jordan Peterson there?
I was impressed by Michigan, both with the fact that they drove that far and that they live in Michigan. But
I've got Seattle, California. Any other long distance people here? Denver. Not now, relatively speaking, yeah, no. Out of state. How many of you came from out of state? Whoa!
Whoa! Look at this.
Wait a minute. Give me a second.
I had to wonder why you booked this in
right.
Tulsa. There's no Tulsa people here.
No.
Well, they're all at Oral Roberts University and Rhema Bible Training Center. Everybody, hold your hand up again when he pulls his camera up.
Once the old man figures out how to
All
run
right, hand
a
up
game.
if you came out from out of town.
No, there's a problem with the Galaxy S9 where it takes forever to fucking focus. So literally you're all still a blur. There we go, now you're sharp.
I'm still a blur, so don't worry about it.
Okay, we have a roaming microphone. If anybody has a comment or question, this is the audience participation portion of our program. So,
Which is my favorite bit.
we'll try to keep the answers pithy, and good luck with that. And I see a hand back here, so let's start. And Rhonda's going to bring a mic to you.
Hello? Okay. Hi there. I'm Haley from Arkansas. Matt, earlier you mentioned trauma and your limited experience with trauma. Since I've joined the atheist and secular communities, I've spoken with many seemingly more than average who have significant childhood trauma, and that trauma played a large role in them coming to the conclusion, along with other evidence, that there wasn't a God behind it all. So here's my two-part question. Have you noticed an above-average exposure to childhood trauma in the atheist community? And regardless, how can the atheist community do better to support other atheists who have had severe trauma, given the physical and mental health impacts of trauma?
Yeah, so I can't say for sure that there's above average. So we're a small enough community that the sample size is not particularly representative. And also, there's probably a lot more trauma in the religious community. It's just going unreported and unrecognized. The things that we can do, so I'm president of the Atheist Community of Austin again, and we're actually, the building's open 7 days a week, 11 to 9. We're producing 9 different shows. They're recording right now and sending me messages while I keep checking my phone. But we also have a proper community there. And the thing that people need to recognize is that in addition to trauma, there's also drama. And as your group gets bigger, there's going to be more little infighting or bickering or whatever else. Just, if you build the community with people who genuinely care and want the community to grow and be of service, as long as what you should have is resources to point them to, the ability to point them to Recovering from Religion or the Secular Therapist Project, things like that. But just make sure that your community is as open and inviting as it possibly can be. And I know that there's a bunch of, so I always forget. I'm going to do something that I have forgotten every time we've been on stage. I make my living off Patreon, patreon.com/atheistdebates, because I keep forgetting to promote myself when I do that stuff.
That's why I included it in my speech.
Yeah, and it never occurs to me. The thing is, if you're building communities like that, it can't be about making money. It can't be about being popular. Guess what? People aren't going to be popular. You're atheists. It needs to be about building the community. And what I try to do is make sure that the ACA is whatever the people in there want it to be and need it to be. If you want to focus on activism in a political sense, then that's what we do. If you want to have family outings, then that's what we do. If you have a place to meet, where we may be starting groups for veterans and other people, that's been suggested, where they may need, some sort of social network that isn't being supported or isn't fostered with religion. Also, to replace kind of Alcoholics Anonymous, to have some kind of secular sobriety. I think it's a good idea that as the groups get bigger, that you also have someone around, maybe find a counselor through the Secular Therapist Project, so that you can have perhaps someone on site for counseling on occasion, or at least point them for people who suffer from religious trauma syndrome and childhood trauma related to religion or anything else. We need to be addressing the whole person, which is why I'm happy that we have 9 shows now. It's not just the Atheist Experience where you call in and argue, it's secular sexuality and parenting beyond belief and all of these other shows that we're doing to kind of address the whole person. It's difficult, it doesn't have to be about shows, but we need to build the community so they have safer places to land and then work together to make sure that they don't need safer places to land. That might be the shortest answer you'll get from me.
Anybody else? Hand up.
Hi, my question's kind of fun and silly. Since you guys are the Unholy Trinity, which one of you would be the equivalent to God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit?
Given that you gave 2 of the examples, which is the equivalent of God or which is the equivalent of Jesus, I'm going to be the third option.
I'm the oldest. Does that make me the father?
You're not.
No, actually, you're the oldest.
I'm the oldest.
You're the father.
I'm the baby.
You're the son. I'm the son. You're the Holy Ghost. Is that
I don't
right?
know. I'm pretty sure I'm whiter than either one of you.
It's funny. The name Unholy Trinity. It was just a play on words. It's not. I think it's healthy to tweak a lot of the stuff that frightened us as believers. Blasphemy being one of them. Who was it who said blasphemy is a victimless crime? And yet in the Bible, it's the unforgivable sin. Of course, this is how the church insulated itself from any sort of criticism, protest, or mockery, ridicule. And now that I'm out, I don't know how many of you came out of religion.
They're here, aren't they?
That's why, like, to me, Jesus jokes are usually the funniest and often most liberating, because the stuff that used to worry me, oh, don't say that, it might be an unforgivable sin, or you might get judged, or those types of things. You realize they're just icons, myths, words, and it's a liberation exercise. So when we named the Unholy Trinity, for me, it was just like, let's take something that, would freak a lot of religious people out, but we think is funny, and let's call the whole tour that. It's not that we think we're 3 amazing icons. It was just sort of a gag.
Yeah, I don't think the whole icon thing fits. It's just a funny thing. I get a lot of fan mail, and I'm really happy that I do. People email me a lot to say that they've walked their way out of religion because of videos that they've seen that I've done. And while I am complimented by that, I'm also kind of humbled by it. I used to think of myself as a vain person, but the more compliments I get, the more humble I feel, which is kind of strange. And although we can safely assume that everybody here has walked their way out of religion, I was actually hoping that there would be some diehard religious believer that had walked into this audience hoping for a fight, because we can do that.
So, allow me to be Mr. Pedantic and nitpicky, because that's the way my brain works. First of all, I don't expect that everybody here walked out of religion, because I imagine there's several lifelong atheists in here. But also, blasphemy isn't the unforgivable sin. It's apostasy, which is specifically blasphemy against the Holy Spirit.
That means blasphemy is the unforgivable sin.
But not just blasphemy.
That is pedantic.
I know. But I mention that because today I'm wearing a T-shirt that would scare the piss out of my mom. Just absolutely. But I have other T-shirts that I've refused to wear. People are like, now I'm more metal than Aron. I have another T-shirt that I had to throw away that was a gift to me that I loved and laughed at because you're talking about blasphemy, and I would never wear it anywhere because I was like, that's a step too far. And it just says, Jesus loves me, but I make him wear a condom. You're welcome.
Get thee behind me, Satan.
Yeah.
Aron brings up a good point, not to belabor this, but when I came out of religion, I, of course, did it on my own with help, right? I mean, I had to come to that epiphany in my life, but it was being encouraged and being emboldened and being helped. I don't know how many helping hands, whether it was a book I read or a video I watched or a debate I saw or something. I wasn't alone when I walked out. And it's such an honor to be a part of a movement where you are able to produce something. So I'm just curious, if your journey in some way was positively impacted by either one of these guys, raise your hand. I hope that reminds you of how important your work is, because you have, all right, fine, but it is because, we're all in this together, and where you are, if you're going through that journey, there's a chance that in your microcosm you are encouraging somebody else, and so on and so on. We got to do this life thing together, and I just found that was something I wanted to draw a circle around quickly.
When I started out doing my activism online, it was because I needed to address an argument that I'd been having over and over and over again. I didn't realize that I'm just copying and pasting the arguments I've already had with other people. Why don't I just put this in a video? And that's where this went. So I would encourage any of y'all, for whatever voice, whether it's YouTube or what have you, whatever voice you have, to please express that. Because what I discovered is that the more, we all start out in a position of what can I do, right? But I discovered that the more that I do, the more it seems I can do. And that was that's a surprising thing for me. That I would amplify my own voice just by sharing it with other people and having them reverberate the same thing, and they put their own spin on it. And so anybody in this audience, can do the same thing that I did, just do a different avenue than I used.
Yeah. And also, for anybody who's benefited from the Atheist Experience, let me clear a few things up real quick. I didn't create it. It's been on for 24 years. And so first of all, it's not my show. It's the Atheist Community of Austin show. And, while I did do a lot to set up the original studio once we moved out of the public access studio, Mark Vandenbrake, Vern Grainer, and a bunch of others have come along. And that's why the audio quality has improved so dramatically and everything else. Both of these gentlemen have been on it. Anybody see last Sunday's show? Yeah. So sitting out in the audience is Jim Barrows, who was on with me last week and is the new regular co-host of the Atheist Experience. Yeah! So it's not me. You've benefited from a bunch of people. I just show up and talk.
You know what I really love about your show is where I do a scripted video where I'm talking about something that somebody has said publicly, and I'm going to address that. You talk directly to that person. And you get the clarification from that person in real time.
It's because I'm lazy.
What? No, even if that were the case,
it is.
Even if that were the case, I don't have the live conversations that you do. I mean, I try to have. I do a video series called "Why Do You Believe," where I try to argue with people who hold very disparate positions from me, and so we'll schedule something where we can have a conversation directly, because I miss that what you get, where you don't even get a warning about what we're going to talk about tonight. Right, you just get a call from somebody, you have to address that, and you do that expertly well, after all these years. And
Are you saying I sucked at the beginning? Because that's true. I just wanted to hear you say it. Yeah.
Now the question.
I have seen you not do very well.
Yes, me too.
But I've also seen you come back and say, you know what, I didn't do that as well as I should have.
Oh, I do that every day. Yeah.
Is there another question out there? I know that there are people waiting. I didn't mean to jump
Ask
into
questions.
you. Pal. Forgive me.
Otherwise, we'll never stop.
Hello, guys. I'm Eric from Jinx, Oklahoma, so not all of us are at ORU right now. So people like Sam Harris make claims that meditation and taking certain psychedelic drugs can be beneficial to our overall well-being. And that by exploring all these states of consciousness can help you find certain truths. I want to get quick takes, if you would, on that topic.
So he's justifying his use of acid?
Yeah. I don't bother trying to justify mine because I don't think it's, and I have, I think it's ridiculous to think that you're uncovering some grand hidden truth when your brain is demonstrably altered. However, I'm not denying the fact that meditation or even drug use can be beneficial to a number of people in a number of different ways. It's just that I don't go there looking for truth.
And Sam Harris likes to use the word spiritual when he talks about getting in touch with those sort of, the birth of a child, a beautiful sunset, the moments in life that, we're looking for language to try to talk about these moments where we connect in a spiritual way. I'm not a fan of using the word spirit, but I'm not totally opposed to it if he's going to use it in a non-superstitious definition. That's something else Harris does as well.
Hey guys, Jim.
You're on, Jim.
Jim from Texas. My question is directed to the panel. If you had a friend or family member that was using their religion to basically give up on their goals in life and say, God will want me to do it, He will put it in my path, how would you motivate them to live their life for themselves?
You're saying that somebody has decided that God has put them on a path of poverty, I guess to inspire modesty? No longer pursue their own goals.
It's made them ambivalent, is what he's saying. They've just sort of decided that God created the current, I will go with that flow.
I've met a number of people who've taken that exact stance, that God has put them through this trial period, right? It's not that God it's just, they're going through hard times. Okay, maybe they need help, maybe they'll find their way out of that, but it's not that God that has done that to them. It's maybe that their community has failed them, it's maybe that they've made bad decisions. But God never had anything to do with it.
To me, it's not just religious people that suffer from this. I hear from tons of atheists who've fallen into nihilism, especially after giving up, religious belief, and they're like, well, in the end, nothing really matters, and all this other stuff. So it's this sort of fatalism of I'm just going to go wherever the wind blows me. And while I can, on some level, appreciate that, and it's their life, but the best thing I can do is let them know that I'd rather see them living the life they want to live. And while there are certainly things that are out of our control, whether they're in the control of, physics or a God or whatever else, there are certainly things that are within your control to some extent, or something that you can do to contribute. And if you just want to live like whatever happens, happens, there's nothing I can do to change that other than try to convince you that there is demonstrably a better way to live. And that if you were to put up the veil of ignorance and say, okay, here's two people, one of them's not going to take any action because they think it's all being guided by something else, and here's another person who's going to try to do the things that they want to do, which of them do you think is more likely to have a better chance of living a better life? And which one would you choose to be if you had the choice? And to whatever extent we have a choice, you can do that at least. You may not be able to choose whether or not you get cancer or whether you keep your job, but you do have some decisions that you can make about your future.
I'm interested too. Part of his question reminds me of something I get a lot. I've got so-and-so in my life. How do I get them to? Right? That's how the question starts. And I'm like, well, you can only control what you can control. I think you can provide advice. You can show an example. But at some point, it's their life. You can't. It's like an addict, alcoholic. It's someone making life choices, even good life choices, that you might happen to disagree with. I mean, it's nothing. There's a lot of that you won't be able to guide or control. All you can do is perhaps advise and show them a better way.
I find myself having lost a lot of dear friends and family members, if not over religion, then over politics. And it's much the same thing.
Well, that's because people are just wrong there.
Nonetheless, you're not going to convince everyone. There are people in my life that I'm not going to convince, of whether it's a religious position or a political position. I'm not going to convince them. Do I love them? Am I going to forgive them for holding the position that I do? That's the choice that I've had to make.
This is a question mainly for Seth. My name is Chance. I'm from Arkansas. And I'm sure many of us in here are aware of what happened with your dog and the support that you got to help the Humane Society. Can you tell us, did they find out that the support came from an atheist community to help them with their efforts?
Yeah, and for the few who don't know the story, in a nutshell, two of my mascot / fuzzy children, Henry and Rat Dog, were front and center if you knew me and followed my pages. They were two little 4-pound dogs, and we lost them both around this time last year. Henry, we took him in for dental surgery, and he died on the table through what we think is medical neglect, but which made it even harder. And Natalie's here, and I'm going to start crying. So we were devastated. We were just devastated. We lost Toots. 2 weeks later, she had a stroke. But after Henry died, I just went online and I'm bawling, and I just said, look, something good has to come out of this, And so we asked the community, the atheist secular community, to help buy a rescue transport van for the Humane Society, because theirs was 20 years old. It had to be jump-started off the lot, didn't have any air conditioning in it. It was just terrible. And so our goal was to get a used van, $12,000. We figured maybe we can get 12 grand and raise it in about 5 days. And this community raised $35,000 in less than 24 hours. They bought a beautiful new transport van that was larger than they thought they would get. It has Henry's face on the side and Toots on the back. And it says, rescued by a few, loved by thousands on its logo. It travels the country to rescue up to 3,000 animals every single year. Natalie and I got to drive the van. It was our honor to drive it in the Bixby Parade. And you better believe they know that money came from atheists and secular people. You better believe it.
Hello. So I started overhearing and listening to your podcasts and other similar podcasts when I was 13 to 14 years old. And I was wondering, have you ever received feedback from any other young listeners or people who were kids when they started listening to your material? And what do you think about young listeners listening to what you create?
I listened to you when I was a kid, Matt.
I'm glad you mentioned Matt because I'm the oldest one. You can answer that, Matt. He's on his phone.
I apologize.
What a millennial.
I apologize. So first of all, I'm always cautious when it comes to somebody else's minor children about what sort of advice, because I'm not their parent and I'm not trying to create difficulty for them. I did, in fact, listen to your question. I like the fact that they're listening. Yes, I will occasionally use some colorful language, but I don't think words are magic. And so if you're more offended that I said fuck than you are that I was talking about priest raping kids or obscenities in the Bible that are real things to be worried about, then I don't care. You can wring your hands and clutch your pearl somewhere else. I talk to kids like they're adults and like they're actual human beings, even though they're not. And I list even my Twitch stream, I list as mature. I try to make sure that I'm not giving a false presentation like, hey, tune into the kids show with Matt Dillahunty. But I'm happy that they're doing that. Now, the reason that I'm on my phone, okay, we're not going to do that. So first of all, I'm getting a lot of messages because the ACA is recording shows today. But also, I'm in the middle of a first date right now. I'm not joking. There's somebody who's come down to stay with me for a few days, but it was scheduled around this, and I was like, okay, you can come Thursday, but Friday and Saturday and part of Sunday, I'm in Tulsa for an event. And she's like, okay, well, I'll also stay Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. And so this fell right in the middle of it. And she had a bad day, and I was like, hey, would it be okay if I did a video call to have like all the audience say hi? And then she said no. And I'm like, this is why we ask.
Matt said something that I thought was brilliant. He said that that people are not people. These names that he hears in his email or whatever, that they're not actually people until they appear on his phone book.
That's not me.
No, that was you.
No, but I'm saying that didn't originate with me.
Okay, it may not have.
That's a Bill Hicks
It's the first
line.
time I heard it.
Yeah, it's a Bill Hicks line.
But that it wasn't that they're not people until until they appear on your phone book. I get that. At the same time, I understand talking to children like they're adults in some level. I got ripped apart because somebody had they'd taken their little kid to the Reason Rally 2016, and they had like a 4-year-old, I'm guessing, a 4-year-old child handing out Jesus videos at a Reason Rally. So you took a 4-year-old to an atheist convention to hand out Jesus tapes, right? Well, CDs. But I remember I knelt down to this little girl and I asked her what she was offering, and she said she's offering Jesus CDs. And I said, I'm sorry, I only want to know things that are true. And she immediately started crying. And I accept there's a whole lot of people that are going to rake me over the coals for this, but I know how influential things happen in our formative years, and that this is going to mean something. I really hope, and I don't know, but I really hope that this is going to be one of those formative moments when she's been fed only one story this whole time. And I, as politely as I possibly could, told her that everything she's been told is a lie.
Yeah, well, the church has what they call the 4 to 14 window. This is a strategy by churches. This is why they have children's ministries that have playgrounds and fanciful colors and special music and state-of-the-art media. They have television networks. They have all this programming and retail-type stuff, toys and games, things that are targeted to children, because they know if they find somebody for the first time and tell them at the age of 20 that a guy at 600 built a stadium-sized boat out of trees and tar filled with camels and penguins and floated it for a year and those types of things.
And he did it all with 2 unskilled laborers, or 3 unskilled laborers.
If you tell somebody that at the age of 20, talking animals and 900-year-old people and blood magic and all those things, that they will laugh you out of the room. But you grab them when they're 4, and the same person who teaches them, don't touch the hot stove, don't take candy from strangers, the person who they rely on for all their basic needs, that person tells them that the Bible is true and Jesus is real. That's a whole other game. It embeds, it's actually part of the child's learning process. And so there's this insidious effort by churches, many of them believing they're doing the right thing, to go after young people because they're young. And when they're 4, 5, 6, 10 years old, they program them, and then they live that inherited belief, and it's very difficult to break out, as I'm sure many people in this room know. People are like, well, how could you have ever believed that? And you're like, you don't know what it was like. Because that's our normal. When we were young children, when we were growing up, it was indoctrinated heavily into us. So.
Can I tell a really short story?
Go ahead.
When I was a kid, I remember I had huge respect for my father. And I didn't realize that he had already lied to me a number of times. I just had huge respect for my father, as a lot of people do. And when he told me that there was a Santa Claus, I wanted to believe that there was a Santa Claus. It was an absurd thing, all of the flying reindeer, all of that, but I'm 8. Now, most kids have already let go of Santa Claus. But the reason that I held on to Santa Claus was because I had a huge respect for my father. A lot of people respected my father. And so I remember having a conversation where we're in the car, where there's my father and my stepmom and my stepbrother, and I have to tell my 7-year-old stepbrother that I know that it's ridiculous to believe in Santa Claus, but my daddy told me there's a Santa Claus, and my daddy wouldn't lie to me. Would you, Daddy? And he said, there's no Santa Claus, son. Just imagine how long it took me to process that.
God, no wonder you're so screwed up.
The 4 to 14 window is about preying on weakness. And it's not just the 4 to 14 window. They go after the infirm or the people who are depressed or the people who have gone through trauma, the people who need something, and they're sitting there saying, we've got the thing you need. And rather than preying on weakness, I'd like to eliminate weakness by helping people get stronger, both kids learning and becoming empowered and strong, and then take people who have suffered trauma and damage and let them know. One of the I go against the 12 steps all the time, because it's like the first thing you have to do is admit that you have a problem and you are powerless. No, you're not. You're not powerless. You are currently in a position where you've been convinced that you are powerless. You are currently in a position where you may not be able to do it on your own, but guess what? You don't have to do it on your own. You have the power of other people, which strengthens your power. And the notion that I'm powerless. So now what I think is happening quite often, and if AA has helped you or anybody else, great. I'm happier that you are sober than I can ever explain. I'm okay, even if a terrible lie has convinced you to stay sober, cool. But I'm convinced that they're replacing one addiction with another, and rather than empowering people, they are creating an addiction upon the method and the group. Now, as long as the people in the group are good people who are there to support you, cool. I don't care if it's AA or the ACA or the ASP, ACLU, whatever. Pick your group.
ASPCA.
Whatever.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to derail you.
Dogs are people too. If you get that empowerment from something that is real and true, great. If you get your empowerment from something that has never been demonstrated to be true, that is unlikely to ever be demonstrated to be true, if you need to reach to a higher power and they're telling you that this must in fact be a God, what happens when you stop believing in that? What happens when it's demonstrated that, now I'm alone, my sponsors left me, I'm reaching out to God, please help me not, why don't I hear anything? Why isn't there any help coming? We are propping people up on foundations made of sand that are going to go away. It's so ironic. What people will often do is project. Like if they're busy, if they're a terrible person who's gaslighting you, and when you start catching them out for it, they'll come at you like you're gaslighting them or something. It's funny to me, not funny, it's strange to me that religions do the exact same thing. The religions that have survived are the ones that have built up protective mechanisms so that when somebody comes at it and says, hey, here's a problem with your religion, they're like, nope, Jesus said you would say that. Oh, your entire religious belief is built on a foundation of sand. You're quoting the Bible to do that. Yes, because it didn't come from God that building something on sand is a bad fucking idea. It came from the people who tried to build stuff on sand. We need to be building people up and not preying on the weak and not praying for the weak, but making people stronger.
I had a close family relative contact me regarding alcoholism. And he was looking for some kind of salvation. And I had to tell him that if you go to AA, they're just going to feed you full of this false nonsense where you put your trust in something else, and it's not that. It's ultimately, it's going to come from you. And I'm sorry to say this, there's not a God that is going to help you. Ultimately, it's going to come from you. It has to. It can't come from anybody else. And the sad thing is that he found the strength in himself to beat his alcoholism. He really did. But he credits God for having done it.
Yep.
What I think is weird is when AA just has you arbitrarily choose something else to focus on. I think that's weird. Like you need to find something that is a higher power, whatever that is. And I always thought to myself, well, it's an odd way to phrase higher power, like you arbitrarily just select something. Anyway, I know there may be another question, or go ahead. Hands? Anybody?
No.
We'll want to do one or two up front here. I don't want to neglect these fine people.
Can we get a napkin? Because even though we're not supposed to have drinks in here, I just spilled Aron's beer because he put it on my phone, which
I don't have a beer because beer is not allowed here.
Oh, it's brown stuff. Maybe it's cola.
That's what it is. It's a really strong Coke.
I'm glad I don't have fingernail polish on, or it would be beating it off right now.
Go ahead.
Eating it off.
Oh, there. I had a friend who for many years through high school and after high school, we talked over religious. He grew up in a very fundamentalist household. I did not. And we would discuss our ideas, and it seemed, his parents thought D&D and like Pokemon were the Satan, and I managed to convince him they weren't. And I seemed to be, for many years, getting him off of a road of his parents' limited view of the world and onto more accepting and skeptical idea. But several years ago, he recently went through some trauma, and the church accepted him in where I could not at the time because I was suffering my own trauma. And he's left my life in many ways, but the few times we do talk, it's often the credit for coming over his problems and getting better is attributed to God. And he's trying to bring back these discussions we had. But instead of viewing the world, once we did, with a question as, well, my parents told me Jesus, but I'm willing to question. Now it's, Jesus, no questions, don't ask. I don't want to have this discussion. And he gave me a book, a religious book, trying to, C.S. Lewis, hey, read this, it'll convince you my God is real. Which I'm like, well, I'd rather talk to you in person for why you believe than you give me a book. So I was wondering if you could tell me how I could make him discuss his views in person and get back to relationship and topics we used to do it, rather than unquestioning, here's a book, if you have a question, read it, don't talk to me.
I was going to pass it to you because you and I talked about this before. So one of the things, first of all, nobody here owes anybody else an explanation for who they are or what they think. You don't have to have an argument if you don't want to. B, it's not your job to fix everybody. All you can do is let them know you care and that you're willing to have the conversations. But if somebody comes to me, like my mom gave me a bunch of apologist books for Christmas after she found out. And I was like, thanks, Mom, but I've already written a rebuttal to this one. I've already debated that guy. And this one I haven't read. If you want to get me an apologist book, just ask me which ones I don't have. But also, if I'm going to read the stuff you give me, are you going to read the stuff I give you? And if that's not going to happen, I got enough people trying to argue with me that I don't need to sit here and read whatever book that you've decided to hand me.
Dude, I know that you haven't written the book yet, but I did, and my family won't read it.
Oh, there are very few people in my family that are going to read my book when it's done. I mean, my brother will, and actually some of them will probably read it on the sly, and just because they're looking to figure it out.
Just on the point, it's a strange thing. These are people that I still love.
Yeah.
That won't read my opinion. They don't want to know it.
Yeah.
I think that speaks in many ways to a deep-seated insecurity, right? If you are genuinely secure in your position, why do you go la 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 whenever someone else walks up to you and they say, well, I disagree and here's why? If it's a genuine pursuit of the truth and you want the best ideas to win, why would you ever shut down the conversation? And I think it is a deep-seated insecurity masking itself as confidence, and it goes out and it shouts in a loud voice, but I think it's compensating for the fact that it's not all that convinced, and some level maybe it, even subconsciously they realize I may not be able to properly defend this.
I went through this. Oh, go ahead.
I come back to, though, I don't, if someone's doxastically closed, if they're a closed system, they're not listening, I think you have to manage how much time you're willing to put into those conversations. The best move might be, in my opinion, to just simply live a loud, proud, secular life in view of them, because you're messing up their categories. They've been told the atheist is sad and pathetic and lonely and miserable and has no purpose and has no rudder and all these other things, and yet out of the corner of their eye, they see you and you're happy and you're centered and you've got a self-constructed sense of purpose and you're able to live life like everybody else does, and you've totally jacked up their categories. On some level, that's going to communicate something to them so that when those doors open, that doxastic openness happens, and they actually start to want to know, not just believe. They might come to you, tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, can we have coffee? I've got some questions. And I certainly hope that day happens.
You might also be too close. I'm not going to redo the whole story. Anybody who wants to can go find the show that I did after my 50th birthday where my mom sent me a card and I put her on blast. We, as pattern recognition machines, are weird. And so the first time you hear something that's foreign, like if you've been raised a Christian and you first meet someone who's an outspoken, open atheist, that's weird. And the second time you hear it, it's like, hey, I think I've heard something like that before. And the third time, it's like now there's a pattern and it's approaching some sort of normalcy. You may be too close to that person, and like the three of us could have a conversation with one theist. And maybe they don't like bald people. Maybe they don't like The Undertaker. Maybe Seth's voice lulls them into a false sense of security. We could all say exactly the same thing, and depending on the order that we approach this person in and what their state of mind is and where they've heard it before, it could be, this direction, and then Seth talks to them and boom, it just clicks. It could be the other direction. It could be that we end up with Aron, and it doesn't matter. This is about, I don't try to convince the person I'm on the phone with on the show. I try to make the best points I can, but I'm doing it for the people who are listening. And let that be, let's plant a seed, whatever. It's the sort of thing where For some people, they may never change their mind, and for some people, they might change their mind immediately, and for some people, it's going to take a couple efforts, a couple of different engagements. The problem is, I can't tell the difference when I meet someone of which category they're in. So I treat them all the same, and I'm willing to have a conversation with them, and my job's not to fix them. My job's to learn. My job's to learn more about them, why they believe. My job's to tell them why I don't accept what they believe, and to find out the things that I'm wrong about, and hopefully with an audience so that somebody else benefits from it. Because in any given audience, there's 20 people there who are going, I'm with that guy, I'm with that guy. I'm not sure.
I know there's a question down here up front, and I want to make sure we get a few of the people who, I want to cover the whole auditorium. Where's my roving microphone? Okay. Or you can just, we can repeat the question.
Yeah, you can just yell at us because we're used to that.
I'll just grab his laugh mic if I need to.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm going to fangirl for just a second. I just want to say all three of you have been really instrumental in my deconversion. And I just want to say, Matt, I really appreciate your directness. I appreciate, Aron, your intellect. It's amazing. And I appreciate your gentleness. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
My question is...
Thank you.
How do you guys deal with getting hit with the same stupid comments all the time? Because Matt, especially, I've watched you on the Atheist Experience, just getting the same, well, I have proof that God exists over and over and over again. And each time I notice that you go into it with a lot of patience, and you might not end up that way, but but how do you deal with that every time you get hit with the same thing that these people have heard before, and they're just not listening?
Well, I have a quick answer to that. Apart from just honesty, there are three things that I have pet peeves about. One, don't talk to me like I'm stupid. Don't make me repeat myself, and don't waste my time. And people are like, how can those be your pet peeves and you do that show? And the answer is simple. Because I walk into that show every week thinking somebody's hearing this for the first time. And I make a game out of it. I try to figure out how quickly I can figure out where they're going, which sometimes backfires spectacularly because I'll get there before them and cut them off, and they're like, no, give them more rope to hang themselves. The other thing is I genuinely care, and so I'll answer the question slightly different, over 15 years or so, and try to see which ones work best or which ones stick. But yeah, the big thing is it's somebody's first time. I am always, even at something like this, who walked in today not knowing who the hell I was? There you go. It's always somebody's first time.
I have a quick one. I'll be loud. Try to be loud. Everybody's heard of separation of church and state.
Everybody's heard of church and state, separation of.
Yeah. So, is the tax exempt status for churches an integration or separation?
The tax exempt status was supposed to be so that churches would not be used as lobbies. So that people could have their religious beliefs, and it wasn't supposed to be integrated with political beliefs. But what we have seen across America is that people are voting exactly the way that their ministers admonish them to vote. So there's a huge problem with that. The churches are being used as lobbies, and so if they're going to be used this way, and they don't have any apologetics for how to do that, then they should be taxed accordingly. But the whole reason that churches don't want to be taxed is because they don't want to provide anybody with their financial records.
Well, and churches are held to it, as 501c3s, they get held to different standards. So if you are another charity or whatever, you are required to give a much stricter accounting of where your money goes.
Yep.
And the church, because they play the religion card and no one wants to look anti-religious liberty, right? They are able to funnel their money in much more clandestine ways. They have people who are making, huge money in cars and mansions and parsonage exemptions and those types of things. I don't know that the answer is taxing the churches.
It is.
Do you think so?
So
because the cat's already out of the bag?
My solution is simple and fair, and that is anybody who wants a tax-exempt status should open their books and show what they're doing in the public interest that qualifies. That solves it all, because for the churches that are actually doing good things for the community, now they can show, yep, this percentage of our income is going to feed the homeless and help the poor and these other things, and then they will earn a tax-exempt status on that. And the part that's going just to sustain the church and all that, okay, you get some tax write-off for a portion of that. But to have the books closed and to say, we're a religion, so we don't get taxed, puts them at an incredible unfair advantage, which is why they own the fucking Marriott and all this other stuff. Just make it fair
Amen,
for
brother.
everybody.
So if they're taxed, does that further create a sort of a tsunami of influence by religion? I mean, I don't know how it can get too much worse.
No, but now you'll be able to go after them and say, okay, you're representing this portion of your church as a political action committee, and so that portion is not necessarily tax deductible. But the fact of the matter is the fire department doesn't get to the church any slower than it gets to my house, and probably gets there faster, and I'm the only one of the two of us that's paying for the fire department.
No, that's interesting.
Yeah, I have a slightly different perspective on this in that I don't just advocate that the churches should be taxed for being political lobbyists. I think they should be fined for being fraudulent.
Where you can actually demonstrate that, I would agree. I just don't know that we can actually demonstrate that.
If I can demonstrate that anywhere, it's a win for me, okay?
I guess I'll select you here in the red baseball cap, and then I'll come to you. Thank you.
So to bring your earlier point around full circle about not indoctrinating children, I think it's equally important not to push simply the fact that we came to the conclusion we did on our children. How do you suggest that so we're new parents, and this has been really troubling me, is I want to build that foundational skepticism into our daughter so that she can come to her own conclusions, and I think she would probably, if we could do it properly, would probably come to the same conclusion. But how do you suggest that we build that foundational skepticism into her so she comes to her own?
Okay, essentially his question is, we see religious indoctrination, and we don't want to do atheist, and we don't want them to inherit our atheism. We want them to be able to come to the rational choice without programming them in the way that religion does. Fair enough? Okay.
Yeah, I gave a different answer to both of my kids. When my daughter, the oldest, asked that question, which religion is right? I thought back to when I was a little boy, and I asked my mother which religion is right, and my mother said, well, ours is, of course. And I thought, of course? Why the fuck would you say some other religion is right if you believe in this one? Right? So when my daughter asked that question, I said, none of them are right, all of them are wrong, including me, which coincidentally happened to be right at the time, because I was a neo-pagan occultist at that time, and it turned out I was wrong. So I gave my daughter the right answer. My son, however, the youngest, asked me, because he'd been indoctrinated quite a lot when I would go to work. You know, other people would be like playing Jesus tapes for him while I went way at work. And he got me alone, and he checked down the hallway and checked to make sure that nobody else was in earshot when he asked me, God, how does God just make stuff? And I knew that he needed a different answer than my daughter did. My daughter was not happy with the answer I gave her. She said, I don't like that answer. And I said, I'm sorry, you got to figure it out for yourself. But when my son asked, I knew that he needed a different answer. And I just leaned forward and I said, he doesn't. And I could see the waves of relief wash over him as suddenly the universe made sense again.
I think there's merit, I'll make this short, in saying, here's what I think. We did a podcast, I've done several podcasts, Parenting Beyond Belief with Dale McGowan and Secular Parenting. Look them up, they're in archive. And I brought in people who are written about this, teaching our children not what to think, but how to think. But I think it's perfectly fine for a parent to say, look, in my journey, here's what I think. I think religion's bullshit, or I think religion may be wrong. And here's why, and here's how I got there. And then I think you'll never eliminate all bias from the raising of your children, but I think you can, instead of where religion teaches them truth with a capital T, I think we say, look, here is the process by which we determine if something is true or false, or at least unsustainable, not demonstrable. And we teach them that, and then we cultivate what religion does not, which is curiosity and doubt You know what? Check it out. Kick the tires. Experiment. Try it again. You are creating an atmosphere. Whenever I sign books for kids, I always sign the signature line, make every day a discovery. I think if you cultivate that atmosphere where they can pursue these things honestly, you've already surpassed what religions do when it comes to the indoctrination of kids.
Yeah, I agree with that. You know, there's the old canard that if you teach children one religion, you indoctrinate them, and if you teach them all religions, you inoculate them. So I'm all for exploration, discovery. If a kid comes up to me and is like, you know, what's the answer to this? My answer is, I don't know, but you don't stop there. It's, I don't know, but how can we go find out? Can we go explore this? I find it, and I hadn't really thought about this till just a minute ago. Would you be, not you, I'm not trying to beat up on you. Would any of us be asking this question with regard to other things? Like, Mom, how do we know the earth is round? Is the earth round? If they were asking about science things, it wouldn't be like, I don't want to indoctrinate them into what my beliefs are. It would be like, hey, here's what we know and what we don't know, and here's how we know that. Now, it may get a little murkier when it's like, Mom, why are the Republicans wrong? Sorry, I'm going to indoctrinate a little bit. But the fact is, this question doesn't occur to us except in this one contentious area. I don't want to indoctrinate. The fact of the matter is, I was indoctrinated. Turned out okay in the long run, the very, very, very long run. I don't panic when I hear that someone is teaching their kids about a religion, because I know a good chunk of them are also going to learn other things. And that in the process of discovery and learning out, finding out that Dad was wrong, finding out that Dad lied, finding out that the world isn't fair, finding out that this happens here, and if you just find the thing that they're most passionate about, if it's science, cool, if it's music, cool, if it's art, cool, whatever, encourage that. Because in that process of discovering who they are, they're going to learn how to explore the world. They're not going to get all the answers right. If they do, give them a Nobel Prize, because I don't know. But that seems to me to be far more important, and to just be open and honest and loving. And I don't think it's likely that the kids are going to get indoctrinated in any direction, and they're more than likely going to come to correct or the best answers that we can come up with, because they did it with a genuine heart and mind that was curious and inquisitive, without somebody pushing, here's the answer. Instead of pushing, here's the answer, it's what's the right question? Because we ask the wrong question too many times.
My question kind of goes along with his question a little bit, and also with Aron's story about your dad, from the perspective of your dad. I have kids that are 16 and 21, and I raised them in the church. We didn't go religiously, but I did raise them with them thinking that I believed in God, even though I wasn't completely comfortable with it. And I don't care about the fallout from the rest of my family or my friends or anything like that, but I do care about what my kids think, and I'm not sure how to approach that conversation with them without them being like, we hate you, you lied, you're going to hell, Mom, stuff like that. And I was just wondering if you had any ways of actually approaching the conversation.
Approaching the conversation about whether there's a hell?
No, about whether or not
just how to tell them how I think differently now than I did when I was raising them.
Yeah, I had to explain to both of my kids why they got different answers to the same questions. Because I'm on the journey too, right? I mean, so are you. And I keep thinking thank you. I keep thinking that instead of the three of us, that in 5 years there's going to be 5 or 10 of us, and that one among this audience will be up on the stage. That we're all in it, and some of the other people that are on the stage are right now in a church somewhere, and that they still believe, because we're all in a journey. And some of us, not everybody, obviously, by my speech, there's some people that don't want to know what the truth is, but there are some people who do want to know. And they're the ones that are on a journey. The other ones that have decided that they're going to be stagnant. Did you care about what the truth is? Did you want to impart what the truth is? Or were you were you indoctrinated to the point that you were told that you're only supposed to give a specific message to your kids, and that's what you did? I recognize that that's where my parents came from.
Yeah, own it. The only thing that matters is that they know that you care about them, and the fact that you did something that you're not proud of or that wasn't actually honest or whatever else, the fact that you're owning up to them that this was the case shows them that you care. People ask me, are you mad at your parents for indoctrinating you? No, not one bit. They loved me and they did what they thought was right. They just happened to be wrong about it. I'm more mad at them now because they won't listen or talk or consider it, and they flatly said we're closed-minded on this subject and we won't talk about it. That I'm more irritated, and I still don't blame them because this was something that was done to them. They were so beaten down by authoritarian dogma and religion that they are now incapable of doing that. I'm not mad at them, I pity them. And if my parents ever came to me and said, hey, we weren't really sure about all this, we were doing the best we could, and now we're not sure what we believe, and we hope you're not mad at us for doing that, I'd be like, yay, welcome back.
I think there's utility in showing how, if you're working toward the truth, we want to change our minds to pursue the better answer. It can actually become an object lesson in how science works. You know what, I used to think this, and then I found better information, and I changed my mind. That teaches something to the child. You know, I learned something I didn't know before, and my perspective widened, and I changed my mind. That's a wonderful statement to make. People ask me, well, how did you, this Ann Coulter reading, Fox News watching, Rush Limbaugh listening, Bible thumping, Republican, angry white male become an atheist activist? And I'm like, I discovered better information and I changed my mind. And I think that's a liberating thing to teach a child. So, forgive me for limiting it to one more, and then we'll have to put a cap on it.
I see one hand raised back there.
Sure, this gentleman here.
Make it good. All the pressure is on you for the last question.
You guys were talking about child indoctrination. I have a question too, but I just wanted to say that I went to a private Christian school from pre-K till 5th grade, and I was so indoctrinated that my Sunday school teacher in 1st grade mentioned that Adam and Eve were naked before they sinned, and I stood up and I said they weren't naked, they were clothed in the righteousness of God. And the first time, that's how indoctrinated I was. The first time that I asked a question was in 5th grade, and I asked what about the Native Americans who never got to hear about Jesus? And it was my Sunday school teacher. He's a guy who told me, I don't think that they had souls. And that's what he told me, and I was in 5th grade. But my question was if each of you had one argument to go to bat with to argue against theism, basically, what would it be? Just one. Let's say Christianity, for example. If you had one point that you could say, like, you know what I mean.
Okay, regardless whether it's Christianity or any other religion, my answer to that is, can you show me the truth of it? And then it doesn't matter what religion you hold to. Show me something that doesn't require faith to believe it.
I'll go with that.
I don't know.
It's tempting to try to come up with something else, but the truth is that it's kind of broad. And first of all, various God propositions and religions are unfalsifiable, so attempting to falsify the unfalsifiable is futile. So it really is kind of a show it to me, prove it. How do you know that? The truth, though, is that in much the same way that person that talked to you, that their ad hoc explanation was that the Native Americans didn't have souls, most people don't have the first damn clue what's in their holy book or anything else. And I kind of like to remember a couple of obscure Bible verses, or ones that are particularly useful for me, that they probably haven't read or heard about or thought of. And more than trying to prove them wrong, I would just, hey, let's go to 1 Peter 3:15, where you're supposed to be prepared at all times to give a reason for the faith that's within you, so do it. Give me the reason. And that reason better be specific to your version of that religion, because if a Muslim could give me the same reason, you got a problem, you guys go work it out. When you figure it out, come back.
I like to go to the Old Testament verse about the woman being forced to drink the bitter water. They suspect that she's been having an affair. And if she miscarries the illegitimate child, then that is proof, of course, that she was an adulteress. And if they feed her the poison and she survives, somehow she is vindicated in some way.
Well, it's not whether she survives, it's where the fetus survives.
Is that
Because
it?
Numbers 5 is advocating abortion.
Well, what I do is I tell them that story, but I tell them it's from the Quran. And watch the reaction.
Yeah.
That's terrible. That's terrible. Who could believe such nonsense? Oh my God.
The Quran says a rapist should be forced to marry his victim?
Did you know that
it
the
doesn't.
Quran instructs you how to torture your slaves? That's terrible. And then I go, actually, I just read you the Old Testament. No, you didn't. Yes, I did. And then I can show them the specific. There are a couple of guys in the Netherlands. They have a YouTube channel called This Is Normal.
Yep.
They went out and they put a Quran cover on a Bible and they read verses to people and they were aghast. And then a few seconds later, they go and they pull the cover off. You should have seen their faces. It was beautiful. Beautiful. I don't know if I have a go-to argument. For me, it comes down to, if a God worth following existed, why would he punish the curious or the doubter? Why would he punish us for wanting to be shown? I heard Matt say once, and I like to use this, people say, well, what would it take to convince you? And I'm like, well, I mean, outside of one good piece of evidence, I don't need to know what it would take to convince me, because if God knows everything, he already knows. The omnipotent God already knows exactly what it would take to change my mind and convince me that he exists. And if he knows that, that's on him. And any God worth worshiping who would punish me for requiring that would not be worth following anyway.
I got to point out that the Quran says many times over that God decides who's going to believe and who doesn't, and that he has already clogged your ears. But he's going to punish you.
The Bible says it too. He's given us over to a reprobate mind.
The predestination argument that
for
Calvinists
me,
have.
my go-to, which I wasn't going to pull out something I've said a million times, but if the Damascus Road experience is good enough for Saul, why isn't it good enough for the rest of us? Why does one person get a direct experience with a God that undoubtedly would demonstrate it's real, and the rest of us have to, do something else, or put together Alvin Plantinga's modal logic argument for a modal version of the ontological argument that less than 1% of the population will ever understand? Why is that the best argument for the existence of God? If God can show up and turn Saul into Paul and build a church like that, he can fucking show up on my show, because no God that doesn't give me 5 minutes of their time isn't worth any of mine.
All right, before we wrap it up,
not bitter.
Hopefully they'll give us the building for an extra few minutes. I want, if I can ask my wife to come up, and Rhonda Dorrell. Everybody, hang on. The atheist community of Tulsa is responsible for this. We had an idea. The atheist community of Tulsa is the organization that made today possible. If you are in Tulsa and you are not connected and looking for community and an opportunity to make a difference, to do charity work, to make friends, to do those things, consider them and know that they are good people. And Rhonda Dorrell from ACT has been irreplaceable when it comes to putting all of this together. And we have something, Natalie and I would like to and everybody here would like to give you a special gift just for you. Sort of our Valentine gift to you. Please know what a gift you are to us. Many of us spend so much time in a room with a camera, with a microphone, being able to be among people who get us, who connect, we get each other, we support each other, we do life together. I can't put a price tag on it. It is such an honor to be a part of your lives, to be a part of your journeys. Know that as much encouragement as you feel like you've gotten from us, trust me, it's reciprocal. We feel the same. We are so thankful to have had you here today. I hope it was worth your time, your long travels, and if I was to be a believer, I'd say God bless you. But whatever. We love you.
Can I get an amen?
And thank you so very much for coming. We appreciate you very much. So thank you all.
Thank you.